How are you doing, Internet? I'm Beanut, and if no one expected the Spanish Inquisition, what about the Jewish pirates? No joke, and it does make sense in historical context. It is the item which I would like to review for you today, and this comes from the Vaughan Public Libraries. You'll forgive my hope for reading off of the book itself because this is a rather long title. Rather, the subtitle is the long part. Jewish Pirates of the Caribbean, how a generation of swashbuckling Jews carved out an empire in the New World in their quest for treasure, religious freedom, and revenge. You know it's gotta be good if revenge is involved. Critchler's work here was patronized by Ainsley Henriquez, a relative of Abraham Cohen and of Moses Cohen Henriquez. The context I was talking about earlier is the expulsion from Spain as well as the Spanish Inquisition. By August 2nd, 1492, the Jews were to have chosen between death by burning, conversion, or leaving Spain forever. And for those who were too stubborn to leave or convert, death became the only option. Of those who converted, some were sincere, however some became secret Jews, or conversos. Meanwhile, those who left Spain had very few options, as Portugal wasn't exactly safe, meaning that it sometimes joins with Spain and sometimes not. So identifying as Portuguese or New Christian there wasn't always safe. So they set out for known safe harbors for the most part. However, others struck out for the New World. Those staying in the Old World went to places like Morocco and Amsterdam, as they were known to be safe for Jews, or at least safer, outside of the range of the Inquisition, which was the important part for the Jews trying to live out there. Then there were those Jews who went out along with the other explorers and discoverers of the world, such as Christopher Columbus, who some theories say was a converso himself. Whether or not this was true, he was instrumental in providing another safe avenue for the Jews in order to survive. And in fact, he held out for inherited rule so that his family could continue to keep the Jews safe in any new lands that he discovered and therefore had the right to rule. The Jews of the diaspora, wanting to prove their value, picked up all these skills and professions that would help them not only to survive in new and strange places, but also proving themselves valuable to their patrons and their hosts. They were merchants when the Spaniards refused to take on the merchant part. They were voyagers, explorers, financiers, shipwrights, and pilots, people who navigated and also innovated on instruments for navigation. One of the biggest ways in which the Jews proved themselves worthwhile, in fact indispensable, was with their network, mostly in trade and in intelligence. The Jews from the area were from the Sephardic tradition, but that went from all the way from Eastern Europe all the way down to Morocco and Northern Africa. There were also the Ashkenazi Jews, who were in Eastern Europe. And because they were part of the same faith, even though they had different traditions, they had this huge network that they could use to sell goods and share information. So while many rulers decided to dispose of the Jews once they thought they were no longer useful or profitable, or they were creating some trouble with the non-Jews within the area, there were a lot more practical rulers who knew how the Jews could help in order to fund and support the nation and the kingdom, and those were the ones who helped keep those Jews safe. The Jews themselves did what they could, at least within the book itself, to try to ensure their own safety. But when the Inquisition came in, they would ask for assistance from the Danish or the English, whoever they could try to get in order to help keep them safe, because they knew that if the Inquisition came in and they started questioning people, then they would get more and more of the community. This was the way that the Inquisition operated, after all. When someone suspected a Judaizer, because being Jewish practicing Judaism was illegal within Spain and all these other countries, then the Inquisition would arrest these people, torture them in order to try to get new names, and then sentence them either with lashings if they couldn't prove it exactly, but by burning if they could. Sometimes torture under the Inquisition would last for years, anywhere from 2 to 8, maybe even 10, depending on who they were interrogating. And especially for leaders of the Jewish community, this was an incredibly hard, taxing time, and they probably knew that it would still end in their deaths regardless of who they might give up in the process. Of course, this was the age of discovery, of exploration, and the Jews wanted to go to new land to get out of the hands of the Grand Inquisitor. And this came to include Jamaica, which Columbus himself discovered on his second journey out, as well as places like Peru, Brazil, and Mexico. So new places that they could try to settle with some help from the natives, although the natives themselves became a sort of victim when they fell prey to smallpox and other European illnesses. Without getting too much more into detail about this book, you really should read it yourself. There was a lot of trade and cultivation involved within this period. The Jews brought in sugar from Africa as well as slaves, because slavery was a part of the way the world worked at the time. And they also mined gold and silver from the New World to bring back into the Old World, and also to make themselves richer. Funny thing is that all this time I've been talking, not once have I mentioned this word just yet. Piracy was an important part of what was going on. And there are quite a few Jewish characters, as well as the non-Jewish ones, who were important during this period. Around Africa and India, you had the Barbary pirates, like Barbarossa and the famous Jewish pirate Sinan Rice. While Barbarossa was known and feared throughout the seas, it was Sinan who was actually pulling off most of the raids and commanding the fleet. It was very interesting seeing as how he might not have been the more intimidating one, since he didn't have the flame red hair. That was Barbarossa. Then, across from these corsairs, you had the buccaneers, the Pirates of the Caribbean, for which the book is titled. And they included such personages as Samuel Palache, who was an influential pirate and merchant, as well as a founding member of the Amsterdam Jewish community. And later on in his life, after he gave up piracy, he went into diplomacy and fought for Jewish civil rights. Further, he encouraged and influenced others who would become civil rights leaders, such as Abraham and Moses Cohen, who I mentioned shortly earlier. The Pirates of the Caribbean were called buccaneers because of the name that came from the way that they were barbecuing meat when they were settling in Tortuga, the real-life Tortuga, not the one from the movie. And the Spaniards didn't really like that there were these people there who weren't really part of the colony, so they hunted out all of the game that the buccaneers were hunting and preparing and then selling in order to make profit as well as to live off of. And the buccaneers didn't like that. So they went from hunting and barbecuing and selling, merchandise in other words, to raiding Spanish ships. So just like with the Jews, the Spaniards created a whole different problem. My favorite part in the story has to center around Port Royal in Jamaica, and it is here where many of the Jewish merchants settled, and hidden Jews as well, Portuguese, and they were settling there for the king first of Spain and the Dutch, and then finally the English, when the English came in and conquered it so that the Inquisition could not get in. And one defense that Jamaica had from early on, and because of the actions of the Spanish, were the pirates. Because the new Jamaican colonists, they made a deal with the pirates in order to keep the harbor safe. So the pirates would be around and discourage the Spanish from attacking. So the pirates would come into Port Royal, and they would sell off their booty and their gains in the harbor. And some of the people who they would sell to first were the Jewish merchants, who would then resupply them and repair the ships, as well as selling materials to Old World. And Old World would send back refined goods, which they would then also sell to the pirates and the other settlers. Despite legalization, though, of piracy through letters of marque and similar measures, it came to be frowned upon much quicker than anything else. So when the authorities started to come in, Jamaica was transformed from the capital of piracy within the New World to a plantation capital. But it was still a very, very vibrant marketplace. And it was after this transformation and evolution in 1665 and later in 1667 that Jews in Amsterdam, Holland, Spain, Portugal, and England finally all had rights as normal citizens. And this is where the Jews finally had more of a level playing field. It wasn't perfect, but it was much better than it had been. And part of the cause behind that was that these Jews, mostly merchants but also pirates, had put pressure on the ruling class to see them more as equals. Because without their help, without their support, these nations wouldn't have made it. And when King Charles II came into power in England, he was basically broke. And he knew that despite protests from his own people, his own merchants, without the Jews, the crown would not survive. So he couldn't dispose of them the way Spain had done before. It was essential for these nations that they have Jewish support, and so they can be disposed of. In any case, the Jewish Pirates of the Caribbean was a very interesting and worthwhile read in my experience, and I can recommend it to anyone who wants a little bit different of a perspective on the era, because it is very different to have found this than what you may have been expecting of the people and also of the era itself. I do have to admit, though, that I wouldn't have found this book without Vaughan Public Libraries being there and offering it for readers to have. So thank you, Vaughan Public Libraries, for this. That about wraps it up for this video. I hope you enjoyed it, as well as the new angle on my camera. Let me know in the comments below what you think, and, well, I hope you enjoyed it. See you in the next video. Bye!